Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey, Joe on Joe listeners, it's me, Joe Slepsky, and I'm back and you're back. This is the quarantine re-releases of our original tracks going back 4 years, and I hope you're enjoying these as much as I'm enjoying reliving them, warts and all. I think you can easily hear where I'm finding myself and finding what the show turned out to be, so I'm really happy to share these with you guys. Again, we pulled these back from behind the Patreon wall, and I wanted to make them available to everybody during this time to share and give and listen and have fun, especially because G.I. Joe's back on YouTube now. So, yeah, so I appreciate that. And you guys can always follow me at Joe on Joe Pod on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Let me know what you think of some of these early episodes, how terrible they are, or how funny they are, or how awful they are. And we're starting recording back up again, so reach out to me. Let me know, joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know if you want to join me for an episode. I believe we're going to jump into G.I. Joe Extreme very, very soon. So without any further ado, here is the OG track from Joe on Joe 4 years ago. Enjoy.
You are listening to the Joe on Joe podcast, the only podcast where Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hi, and thanks for listening to Joe on Joe. I am Joe of the titular Joe on Joe, and today we're going to get into the 12th episode, which is the second episode of the third miniseries, if those numbers aren't enough for you, of the Pyramid of Darkness saga. This episode is called Rendezvous in the City of the Dead. It sounds very ominous, and it should be thrilling. Before we go in, remember to check us out on Facebook, like us at Joe on Joe Pod. You can find us on Twitter, Joe on Joe Pod. We're on Instagram as well, and I keep promising to actually do stuff on Instagram. I swear to you, one day I will. And you can send me an email. Most importantly, send me an email at joeandjoepod@gmail.com. And if you're a listener and you want to be a guest on the show, let me know. We'll get you on it. So, without further ado, here we go into Rendezvous in the City of the Dead. Dum 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 dum. Of course, there is Flint letting us know it's okay. Now, we're going to get the recap, so we're going to find out what happened last episode. But I'm not kidding you when I say this is my favorite of the miniseries. It brought so many warm memories back. I really enjoy Shipwreck and Snake Eyes on their own in the Cobra City. The fact that it's a city added a lot of layers for us. The fact that the Joes, they introduced the city near the Joes, and then Cobra had this whole underground city and this whole underground network. So good. And then how about the Tribble-esque Fatal Fluffies? They go into space and they morph into the giant monsters, which we're going to see a lot more of in this episode. Like, it's great. And you're getting introduced to all these new characters. So I'm excited. Let's go into the recap right now.
Using a diversion, Cobra stows strange cargo aboard the shuttle, captures Space Station Delta, and fires the powerful laser cannon, destroying Joe headquarters. But this is only the first step in Cobra's master plan to build a pyramid of darkness, beneath which no source of electrical energy will function. Battling their way past huge water robots, Snake Eyes and Shipwreck suddenly face extermination at the entrance to the Control Cube factory. As we begin the next exciting episode of G.I. Joe, the Pyramid of Darkness.
So the action picks up with Shipwreck, Snake Eyes, Timber, and Polly trapped in a room where they were trying to enter the Cobra base by using the secret password, which is... And Shipwreck keeps getting it wrong. The walls are closing in. They've got spikes. There's buzzsaws on the floor. And Polly saves the day, which is really what good is a parrot for, but to save the day, as Polly just did. I mean, that's creatively, dramatically, that's why we use pirates, right? They're there to repeat things that they've heard. So I love it. That's what G.I. Joe does with it. So they get past the robotic guard, which again looks like Raj 2000 from John Byrne, if there's any John Byrne comic book fans out there. And you've got Bill Ratner doing the voice of the Cobra Overlord that's telling all the Cobra soldiers what to work on next. And these two are just about to put a tracer, Shipwreck put a tracer on one of the Cobra cubes to alert the Joes. And then now they're getting questioned by the commanding officer.
Earning your pay, snakeling. Now get to work.
Work. Oh, aye, sir. Right, sir. Work.
And they think they're safe when...
Since when are birds and dogs part of Cobra regulations?
Which is a very good question. I want to commend this gentleman who, by the way, has a very, very questionable mustache. I want to commend him for asking the right questions. And Shipwreck pulls the old move of, oh, these are Destro's animals.
Well, Hitler had a canary, Attila the Hun like goldfish. What can I tell you? You want Destro's zoo,
That may be
buddy,
the
you
only
got
mention
it.
of Hitler in the G.I. Joe. But, you know, they didn't shy away from it. So we definitely know that they exist in a world where Hitler once rose to power, which is interesting. He just said, if he isn't nice to him, you let me know. And I can't tell who he was talking to, if he was talking to Snake Eyes or Polly,
Thanks for letting us establish
which makes me
temporary
laugh.
headquarters on your carrier, Admiral Ledger. Temporary is a word to remember, Flint. I run a tight ship, and that doesn't leave much room for visitors, even when they're friendly, but especially when they're female.
Okay, so that is Admiral Ledger. So the rest, we cut to the Joes, who are on the USS Flag, which is being run by Admiral Ledger. And Admiral Ledger seems to have some problems with women, not only of authority, but women, period. He's not doing a lot to set the stereotypes of sailors ahead very much. He's very nervous about having a woman on board, even one as delightful as Lady J. So he showed him that Cobra is heading towards a place called the Devil's
I'm
Playground.
sure you'll pick the right man for the job.
She's not just a lady, Admiral Ledger. She's my teammate. Yo, Joe!
And Flint tells him what's up. So Admiral Ledger, you take your misogyny and you stick it in your hat, okay? So we got a bunch of Sky Strikers. They just take off from the Flag. And meanwhile, up in space, the Fatal Fluffies are now whipping the Joes, who everyone's floating around in zero gravity, and they're putting some components together. We got Mutt and Dusty working like slaves in zero gravity, while the Dreadnoks are driving around on the Cobra four-wheelers, but they're driving like through the air as if the four-wheelers had some kind of independent propulsion system more than just their wheels. It's a very odd thing when you think about it. So Dusty just is singing some down-home corn pone song to, I don't know why. They're floating these pieces around, and they're trying to figure out a plan to get past the Fatal Fluffy.
Lots of luck. First, you gotta get past those scuzzy fuzzies.
I also want to point out that the Fatal Fluffies talk and seem to have their own community. Like they're a species. They're not just mindless robots. They're a species with feelings and emotions and jealousies, and it's quite an accomplishment that Cobra has there. If that's a creature or if that's their robotic build, I don't know. So Dusty and Mutt just hatch a plan. They're going to turn the gravity back on, the artificial gravity back on, and use that moment of surprise to sneak off and try to find Duke, who's up in the command center. So they pass word silently along to all the generic Joes, and all the Joes get ready. They get all their because if you're floating around in zero G and gravity all of a sudden turns on, you're going to fall and hurt yourself. And that's the plan. So all the Joes are going to be ready, while all the Cobras are going to be confused. So Dusty pretends that he's crazy, like he's got like space madness from Ren and Stimpy, and he turns off the gravity. He turns on the gravity, and you see the gravity shoot up to full gravity, and all of a sudden everybody falls out of the sky. The Dreadnoks, the Fatal Fluffies, all the machinery that was being hoisted around, and Dusty makes a break for it. Meanwhile, Buzzer and Ripper and Torch take off after Dusty. And Dusty's at a hole in a corridor. And so now we go to commercial with Dusty leaping off into this hole.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages.
Our file card spotlight this week is on the Dreadnought codenamed Ripper. This is the guy that looks like the white Mr. T with a mohawk, red sunglasses, camouflage, sleeveless t-shirt, and he carried the gun that had the giant can opener on the end of it. So his real name is Harry Nod, N-O-D, and he is from Grim Cape, Tasmania. There are devils in Tasmania, and Ripper is probably the meanest of them all. Was expelled from nursery school for extorting candy from his schoolmates, and spent most of his adult life in various correctional institutions. He is a professional criminal motivated by greed and a malignant dislike for the niceties of civilization, except for motorcycles. His specialty in modus operandi are edged weapons and cutting tools, which explains that giant machine gun with a big old can opener on the end. He is known throughout the swamps for using his blade like a cross between a fireman's axe and a can opener to unlock gates and crack safes. Now, it's theorized that Henry spent some time in the Australian military, where he developed an affinity for the motorcycles. Apparently, the military wasn't for him, and he once again embarked on a life of crime, this time as a safecracker. He eventually joined up with the Dreadnoughts, a ragtag outfit of Australian bikers, and he found his place among them. His foremost companions, of course, were Torch and Buzzer. They love grape soda. They love donuts. Absolutely one of the top comic reliefs on the TV show. And what else is there to say about Ripper the Dreadnought? My file card that I have on him still has the Toys R Us price tag on the back. And he was purchased for $2.97. So there you go. That's our file card spotlight for the week. And back to the show.
Now, back to G.I. Joe.
So Dusty is plummeting into this hole in the space station and hoping that Mutt is on time with turning the gravity back off, which he does, and it saves Dusty. It brings him down to a very gentle landing at the bottom of whatever this corridor is. And now, with the gravity turned back off, the Dreadnoughts can't go down there and chase him because they wouldn't be falling as fast as him. So they take off another direction, and then Mutt turns the gravity back on and then back off. And so now it's screwing around with everybody and really, really just make it a mess. So we see that Zartan is up in the command room with more Fluffies and Duke. And here comes Dusty, who, by the way, just tossed aside a couple of those flayed Fluffies like he was a linebacker. It was pretty great.
Seize the prisoner, you miserable slave driver! And stops!
I don't know if Dusty was planning on the Dreadnoughts part of this, but they can't stop themselves, so they come in and they wreak more havoc.
That should be enough gravity
Give
to
Dusty the
satisfy
chance
you for
to
quite a while.
check out some more stuff, and he sees schematics of the Pyramid of Darkness on the screen. Has a chance to talk to Duke, find out what's up, and Duke's message to Dusty is, Dusty, get a message back to, and then he gets cracked on the head by a fatal Fluffy, which shuts him up. One could only assume it was like, get a message back to Joe's headquarters. Of course, like, who else is he going to call? Like, get a message back to my ex-wife.
Commence implantation. 3.09
So here we go.
minutes down on
Back
vertical
to
axis.
the planet Earth, and we've got Destro, who is he's at a site that I don't know what it is, because they're planting a Pyramid of Darkness, one of the cubes. They're planting one of the cubes, and it looks like lava because it seems to be boiling. And a bunch just jumped up and hit him on the face, and he used a face sander to sand it off of his face, which, because Destro has a metal face, very funny. An awesome little gag, right? Watching, and it's red. And so watching it, you think, oh, it must be like lava, like they're near some active volcano or something. And because his face is metal, it could withstand the lava and all that stuff. And then that's why you would need a sander to, like, because the lava would hit his face and harden. But now the guys, Flint and Lady J, just dove in it. And they're standing in it. So it can't be lava, even though it's bubbling like it's hot lava. So I can only think it's hot mud, maybe? Like red boiling clay mud, which would still be kind of awkwardly warm. I don't know. Like, I don't get it. Like, they have a cool location, but then they proceed to break the rules of it. I don't know.
Cobra Commander.
Up his nose with a fire hose!
Shipwreck and Snake Eyes and they see Cobra Commander giving some instructions to the rest of Cobra. And, of course, Cobra Commander lays out what their big plan is for the Cosmic Cubes, which then informs Shipwreck and Snake Eyes of what these cubes are for. Because Ron Friedman, as a writer, he realized the importance of each characters don't always know exactly what the reader knows or the viewer knows. So the characters have to learn these things on their own, which is something completely forgotten in the recent blockbuster, Batman v Superman, to go off on a tangent, where Lois Lane suddenly just absolutely knows that they need to get the kryptonite spear out of the water, even though absolutely no one said, hey, Lois, get that kryptonite spear out of the water to stop Doomsday. So, once again, G.I. Joe Superior. The guys break into an office, and it's still Polly and Snake Eyes and Timber. And they break into an office, and they steal a disc with a bunch of data on it. It looks like a CD-ROM, too, which is pretty fun. Because back then, it was would have been like 5 1/4 floppies. So that's cool. Overhead, Snake Eyes does some kung fu. Shipwreck does some pirate fu. Shipwreck compliments Timber. Polly gets jealous, and he doesn't say anything about Snake Eyes. Like, Snake Eyes, you're awesome. I think it's because it's best left unsaid. Everyone's jealous of him. He's the man. And they steal one of those train, like 2-man seesaw train carts. I don't know what those things are called, but they steal one, and that's how they escape. So we're back in space, and the Fatal Fluffies are whipping everybody again. And Mutt and Dusty are once again still on the prowl to break free. I want to know, at what point does Cobra just say, you know what, these two are trouble? They already tried to break out once. We're just going to put them in a cell, and the rest of you can do all the work. So, but they don't, thankfully for us, because they're awesome. They're about to trick the Fatal Fluffies into kind of getting in a fight, because even though they're sentient, they're kind of dopey, and they start fighting each other. And while they do that, they're going to attach a scanner onto the main communication hub. And that noise is the sound that Fatal Fluffies make when they're fighting. Dreadnoks are breaking it up. So it's a big Fatal Fluffy Dreadnought brawl. And while they're doing that, and Dusty, who Mutt formerly identified as a former refrigerator repairman, which is cool because it gives background, they get ambushed by a Fatal Fluffy who shoots fire out of his mouth.
Joe will
Go to
return
commercial.
after these messages. Now back to G.I. Joe.
Dodging the fire. Well, okay. Well, wait a minute. Like all great cliffhangers of the old serial days, it cliffhung on him shooting fire at him, and when we came back, he was just whipping him. So, okay. But they threw a jolt of electricity onto the Fatal Fluffy, scared him away, and then he comes in there with his soldering iron, and he solders this tracking device onto the communications circuit board, which is what they're trying to do. So when that happens,
the Crimson Twins will soon reach the City of the Dead without interference from G.I. Joe.
we finally get to the City of the Dead. The place that the episode is named after, we don't even get to until the third act. But now the Joes, thanks to what Mutt and Dusty did, the Joes are able to see the communication.
They're planting cubes throughout creation. If we don't start retaliation, we're sunk.
And that's Roadblock doing some great rhyming. And here we go with Debbie Downer, Admiral Ledger again. Hold on, crew. Before we get too excited, we got to do something. And then he just repeats what Roadblock said. Admiral Ledger, you're a waste.
You know, Footloose, I think Admiral Ledger showed exceptional judgment in assigning us to head this cube-chasing detachment. You and I are a uniquely capable combination, don't you think?
Like Mixner, never mind to me, Airtight. I'll just mellow out until we hit the City of the Dead.
I love everything about this scene. This is Airtight and Footloose, two new Joes. Airtight's the hazardous conditions guy. He's in a hazmat suit. And Footloose is a infantry trooper, kind of a generic guy. He used to ride the dune buggy a lot. Really great characterization. They got accents. They got personalities. You could tell they're wildly different. Apparently, Footloose displays that the Joes do not do random drug tests. At least they don't frown upon marijuana use. And then we go right next to that. We go to Alpine and Bazooka, who we've seen before, but just character after character after character of saying, these are the people you're going to love. So let's take a couple minutes to introduce to you how great they are. It's great. I love it. Shipwreck and Snake Eyes are using the seesaw train car to escape, and Polly is lipping off as usual, where Shipwreck threatens him. And now, okay, Timber is now pumping one side of the seesaw train engine while Shipwreck tries to pull the ripcord. He's trying to get the engine started. He almost falls. Timber saves him. But the sight of Timber pushing up and down on the seesaw is one that you're not going to forget anytime soon. It's really funny. And Cobra proceeds to chase them in very phallic-shaped Cobra amusement park roller coaster cars, basically. And they're catching up. And now this whole scene, very, very much inspired by the Temple of Doom, mine car scene, of course. The Cobra guy just said 10,000 shillings. Cobra shillings. That means Cobra has their own money, which makes sense.
Faster, Snake Eyes, faster!
And it makes sense because Cobra wants to take over the world, right? So it makes sense that they would make their own currency and have their own denomination values. But since they're not yet in control of the world, what that must mean is that all the Cobra soldiers that get paid, the only things they can buy are all through Cobra stores. So Cobra never really loses any money because those Cobra soldiers if they make $10 and they go down to the commissary and they buy lunch with that $10, that $10 goes right back to their employer, Cobra. So they're not really building their economy. They're kind of stuck in a closed loop system. Listen, it's going to take an economist better than I am, because I certainly am no economist, to figure this out. But I'm just saying, I think Cobra needs an accountant. I feel like there was an accountant Tomax and Amount were accountants. So they need to make something happen. So Shipwreck and Snake Eyes, they're trying to escape these Cobra guys. They get into a firefight. It's very exciting. They make a makeshift track and they do a jump. And now they're escaping. They're going to pop out of a sewer grate. And sure enough, they emerge like in a subway.
Let's get out of here.
And Shipwreck says, let's stash these uniforms where they belong, which is the garbage can, because Cobra is garbage. And they emerge into Skid Row, of all places. It is like the red light district of Enterprise City.
Great. We just went from the sewer up to the toilet.
And while they're walking, a gentleman in a trench coat with glasses and a mustache, real Kirby style, like Jack Kirby kind of spy guy. He sees him and he reports in on him because that's what bad guys do. They talk into walkie-talkies and tell the bad guys where the good guys are. Now we revisit Destro back at the mud pits. They can't be lava pits, so we'll say mud pits. And Flint and Lady J are about to attack from above, which they do. And they cause a big explosion, but if you're watching the animation, you can see that the ledge they're standing on was animated differently. And so it gets blasted off by Destro, and they fall into this mud, and they're sinking, and to be continued. I don't know if I can wait till next week.
G.I. Joe will return after these messages. In our next episode, Snake Eyes and Shipwreck encounter an unexpected ally in the slums of Enterprise City, and Alpine shatters the mountain of glass by yodeling, while Roadblock, Airtight, and Footloose battle their way through the ancient city of the dead, past giant clay warriors, in a desperate attempt to prevent the Crimson Twins from planting another one of the mysterious control cubes. All in the next exciting episode of G.I. Joe, the Pyramid of Darkness.
Character. That's all we're getting. It's so good. Character, sci-fi, action, global action. It's very exciting. So thanks again for listening, guys. I appreciate it each and every week. If you can hear it, it's my dog barking in the background. Please tell your friends. Please spread the word. And remember, now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle. Go get him, Shirley.